and no one will emerge victorious from it. Lots of bad things have happened, but it would be good for us to forget about.
The 365 Days franchise became one of Netflix's biggest surprise hits, so it's no surprise that fans are still asking the same question. Will 365 Days 4 actually happen? Right now, nothing has been officially confirmed, but that doesn't automatically mean the story is over. Because the first 3 movies pulled in massive audiences around the world, there's still a strong reason for Netflix or the filmmakers to revisit the franchise if they believe there's another story worth telling. So even though things have been quiet, it would be way too early to completely rule out the 4th movie. The original 365 Days was released in 2020 and was based on the novel by Polish author Blanka Lipinska. It introduced Laura Beale, played by Anna Maria Cicluca, whose life changes after crossing paths with Sicilian mafia boss Massimo Torricelli, played by Michelle Moroni. Their relationship became the center of the trilogy, mixing romance, crime, luxury, and drama into a story that immediately grabbed attention. Whether people loved it or hated it, almost everyone seemed to have an opinion about it, and that kind of conversation helped the franchise become impossible to ignore. The success of the first movie quickly turned into 2 sequels. 365 Days This Day arrived in April 2022, and only a few months later, the next 365 Days completed the trilogy in August 2022. That fast turnaround showed there was real confidence in the series because the streaming numbers were incredibly strong. Netflix clearly saw that people kept watching these movies, and that's usually one of the biggest reasons a franchise gets expanded. So the fact that 3 movies happened in such a short time proves the audience was there from the beginning. One thing that can't be ignored is how huge the movies became on Netflix. The original film climbed to the #1 spot on the platform in multiple countries and stayed there for several days. There's a major achievement because thousands of titles compete for viewers every single day. A bunch of people tuned in out of curiosity, while others genuinely enjoyed the romance and the chemistry between the leads. Whatever the reason, the audience numbers spoke for themselves, and streaming platforms usually pay close attention to that. Of course, the series also attracted plenty of criticism. Because of its mature themes and controversial relationship dynamics, critics weren't exactly kind to the films. The first movie even received an extremely low critical score on Rotten Tomatoes. But here's the interesting part. Critics and audiences don't always agree. Although reviews were harsh, millions of viewers still watched the movies anyway. That's something people sometimes forget. A film doesn't always need glowing reviews to become successful if viewers continue pressing play. That's exactly why talking about 365 Days 4 still makes sense. Because streaming success often matters more than critic scores, franchises have survived much worse reviews before. If a platform sees enough demand, another sequel can absolutely become a reality. So while there isn't an announcement yet, the door definitely isn't locked. The franchise has already shown that it can attract attention, and that's valuable for any streaming service looking for recognizable titles. At the moment though, 365 Days 4 has not been officially confirmed. There hasn't been an announcement from Netflix, the cast, or the filmmakers saying another installment is moving forward. Although that may disappoint fans, it isn't the same as saying the franchise has ended forever. Plenty of successful series spend years between installments before eventually returning, especially when studios believe there's still audience interest waiting. One of the biggest reasons development hasn't moved quickly is because Blanka Lipinska only wrote 3 novels. Each of those books has already been adapted into a movie, so there isn't another published novel ready to become the 4th film. Because the original source material has been fully covered, the creative team would need to build a completely original story if they decide to continue. That naturally takes more planning than simply adapting another book. But let's be realistic for a second. Running out of books has never permanently stopped Hollywood before. A bunch of successful franchises have continued beyond their original novels, comics, or games because studios believed there were still stories worth telling. If the writers come up with a compelling idea that expands these characters in a meaningful way, the lack of source material shouldn't be viewed as an impossible obstacle. It's simply another creative challenge. That's why staying positive about a fourth movie isn't unrealistic, because the franchise already has an established audience, recognizable characters, and global name recognition. There's still a foundation to build on. Studios constantly revisit successful properties years later, so silence today doesn't automatically mean cancellation tomorrow. Sometimes waiting simply means the creators are deciding whether they have the right direction before making another installment. If 365 Days 4 does happen, fans can probably expect the major cast members to return. Since the story has always revolved around Laura and Massimo, it would be difficult to imagine another chapter without them. Anna Maria Cicluca would almost certainly reprise her role as Laura Beale, while Michelle Moroni would likely return as Don Massimo Torricelli. Their relationship has always driven the emotional side of the franchise, so bringing them back would feel like the natural starting point. There are also several supporting characters who could easily return if production moves forward. Simone Cecina's Nacho became an important figure during the later movies, and his connection with Laura left plenty of unfinished business. Magdalena Lamparska's Olga has also been a familiar face throughout the trilogy and could continue playing an important role if another chapter expands the story. The ending of the next 365 days actually gives writers plenty of room to continue. Laura and Massimo reunite on the beach after everything they've experienced together. Instead of forcing a definitive conclusion, the movie leaves Laura's ultimate choice unanswered. She stands between two possible futures, and viewers never actually see which direction she decides to take. That open ending almost feels like an invitation for another movie. Because that question remains unresolved, 365 Days 4 wouldn't need to invent a completely new conflict from scratch. It could simply continue right where the trilogy stopped. Laura could choose Massimo, she could choose Nacho, or she could surprise everyone by choosing neither of them. Any of those possibilities could naturally launch another story without feeling forced because the groundwork has already been established. There's another interesting possibility that comes directly from the original author herself. Blanka Lipinska has mentioned that she'd like to see the story told from Massimo's perspective instead of Laura's. That's actually a fascinating idea because audiences have mostly experienced the trilogy through Laura's point of view. Switching perspectives could reveal motivations, emotions, and events that viewers never fully understood before. A movie built around Massimo's perspective wouldn't necessarily need to erase what came before. Instead, it could revisit familiar events while adding completely new context. Sometimes seeing the same story through another character's eyes completely changes how audiences interpret everything. Because Massimo has always remained somewhat mysterious, exploring his side of the relationship could give the franchise fresh energy while still staying connected to its roots. That approach could also satisfy longtime fans who already know the overall storyline. Rather than repeating exactly the same scenes, the film could expand hidden conversations, private moments, and decisions that Laura never witnessed. It would feel familiar while still delivering enough material to justify another installment. That's a much smarter direction than simply repeating the formula without offering anything different. Of course, if the creators decide to revisit the franchise, timing could become important. Actors naturally grow older, schedules become busier, and successful performers often take on other projects. So if a fourth movie is going to reunite the original cast, moving forward sooner rather than much later would probably make the process easier. Keeping the same actors helps preserve the chemistry that audiences already recognize. The biggest reason for optimism is actually very simple. A franchise has already proven it can generate conversation. Even years after the trilogy wrapped up, fans are still discussing Laura, Massimo, Nacho, and the possibility of another chapter. That level of continued interest isn't something every series enjoys. Because people are still asking for more, there remains genuine value in returning to this world. So here's the positive reality. 365 Days 4 may not be officially happening today, but it's far from an impossible project. The original trilogy found a huge audience. The ending intentionally left important questions unanswered. The main cast could realistically return, and even the author has suggested a fresh creative direction. Those are solid building blocks for another movie if Netflix decides the timing is right. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.